Hi, this is Victor Yerrid.
Okay.
Stage and screen performer and star of the Malcolm Moore Show. What's the name of the show? This is Lord Boom Boom Stick, and you're listening to Creativity as the Cure, a podcast about how creativity influences people and their daily lives and work. And now, here's Malcolm Moore, question mark?
All right, we're back here at Creativity is the Cure. I'm Malcolm Moore, and today I have my special guest, Victor Yerrid.
Malcolm, congratulations on having me on your podcast.
It's great to have you here. So, Victor, just so you know, this is called Creativity is the Cure. You are a very artistic person, but the main focus of these shows is to think about how we use creativity in non-predictable ways in our lives, how we take that same part of the brain that helps us improvise to deal with difficult situations. And I thought it would help out to just, this is the best definition I've seen of creativity, the ability to make or otherwise bring into existence something new, whether a new solution to a problem, a new method or device, or a new artistic object or form. So with that in mind,
you'd like me to recite that word for word? All right, let me close my eyes. It's the ability to form suggestion. I caught 3 words of that. I'm sorry, Mel.
Okay, we'll try it again before the end of the interview. For people that don't know, Victor is a puppeteer, director, voiceover, ADR artist, and consultant. Those are the things on the website. But one thing Victor and I have in common, we are both percussionists.
That's true.
Do you do drums too, or just mainly percussion?
So when you say drums, you mean like drum set?
Yeah, I mean, the way I grew up, you played drum set, and maybe there's someone in the band that did percussion like bongos, or in orchestra, maybe I'm playing snare drum and you're playing timpani. Right.
I played a little bit of drum set when I was younger, but I never got good enough at it. And honestly, I have tremendous respect for set players, because I feel like it's a whole different animal than what I do and have done, which is classical percussion, timpani, xylophones, marimba, cymbals.
Well, to me, being a drum set player, one of the first times I met you, you played marimba at one of the school performances, and that blows my mind. I can't remember, did you do 2 mallets in each hand?
I think for some of it I did. But, that part of my life, I played classical music up through college. But once I graduated, I kind of shifted into other stuff. So I don't even have marimba set up now. It's in my daughter's closet because we had to make room, for the kids. And so it was when we did that show at the school, it was still set up here. But now I have to wait till they all go to college, and I can start practicing.
Then we'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back in business.
I was never a good marimba or xylophone or vibraphone player, but I'm always blown away by the dexterity of not only 2 mallets in each hand. My friend Mika Stolzman, and also about Kiko Abe.
Yeah.
Seeing them play with 3 in each hand, the dexterity and the compartmentalization of the brain blows my mind. Now,
I say Keiko Abe. I don't know if you might be right. I don't know. It might be Keiko. But I actually met her.
Really?
Yeah. I went to, when I was in college, I went to a great school, the Curtis Institute of Music, and we did an exchange with a school over there in Tokyo where we played with their students and they played with us. And
what year was that?
Oh, gosh, it
90s?
had to be 93,
okay.
92, 93. But
go on.
Keiko Abe was doing a master class, so I played for her.
Oh, my gosh.
And, yeah.
What did that feel like? A little intimidating?
Super intimidating. I mean, she's amazing. Yeah. And she, she spoke a little bit English, but I feel like they might have had a translator. I can't 100% remember. But I think I played one of her pieces, a piece called Frogs.
Oh my God.
And then I played another piece like a Chrysler violin piece. I think I had transcribed from marimba that I played for her. But yeah, super intimidating and amazing to hear her students play, because they were all playing with 2 and 3 mallets. And, I can hang a little bit with 2 mallets, but not like those guys. Like they were.
What an experience, though. That you'd never forget, right?
Incredible. And honestly, I made friends over there, I haven't seen in years, but I feel like we would pick up right where we left off. Just those young students was incredible. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's go way back in time. When did you first realize you could make people laugh and or do voices and impersonations?
That's a good question. I feel like, most people who are in the entertainment industry that are, desperate for attention like me, younger child syndrome, started trying to make people laugh when you were little. The first time someone laughs and you get that attention rush and you feel like, ooh, how do I do that again? I don't remember 100% when it started, but I do. My mother does tell a funny story that I don't remember that she told me, but when I was in ballet class, she put me in ballet. I was a little fat kid and she put me in ballet. It was all girls and me. And I had on a white t-shirt and black tights at this recital. And she said, there was a thing where you go across and you do your little jump or whatever. And she said, I came out and I did my little jump and the audience started laughing. Now, it probably wasn't in a cruel way. They probably thought, oh, look at this cute little fat kid. But I took it like, oh, they love me. So instead of doing my jump and going across, I stayed out there.
A little bit extra?
Yeah, I started making stuff up and doing my own little routine because I instantly loved it. So I definitely know I gravitated towards that laughter and attention as a young kid. But impressions didn't come until later. I think that was more...
Did that maybe happen in school, I was going to say?
Well, in college, I started watching Sesame Street.
Okay.
And I loved the voices. I on that same trip to Japan where I met Keiko Abe, I bought these 3 CDs that were not yet available in the States. I hadn't seen them in the States of Sesame Street stuff. And one was a numbers songs about numbers. One was a Jim Henson only songs that he had done, Joe Raposa songs. And I started listening to the voices and I could tell who was Richard Hunt and I could tell which ones were Jerry Nelson.
Oh, wow.
And I just really gravitated towards those voices. So I started doing impressions of those voices. And I think one of the first ones that I thought I got kind of good at was Grover. Mm-hmm. Sesame Street has been brought to you today by the letter C. And I just loved trying to figure out how to imitate those voices. And honestly, when I teach puppetry classes, one of the things I tell people is to try by imitation. You do your version of Cookie Monster. It might not sound like Cookie Monster,
right?
But that becomes my monster voice. Now I talk and right. It kind of morphs into your version of that.
Taking it to different places.
Yeah, so even if you're not a spot-on great impressionist, you can start to develop range in your voice and stuff like that. So yeah, I think I started doing that stuff more in college.
Just in case I forget, your teaching courses, is that all the info of that, is it victoryerrid.com if people want to find out?
There is no info on that on victoryerrid.com. Thank you for your efficiency, Malcolm. No, I just started... I've always done it just sort of when people would ask me, I'd give them coachings and stuff, word of mouth. But media. I just started on a website. Is it called puppetpie.com? Puppet Pie is my friend Stacey Gordon's site where she teaches classes and sells puppets and does other things. So I just started teaching on her site. So I guess that's probably the best place if somebody wanted to do a...
Okay. I can put a link to your site and I can email you, right?
There's nothing on my site, Malcolm. I don't understand why I have to repeat this over and over again. Is this part of the creativity challenge? You give me...
You have failed so far.
Okay, wow.
When did you first take an interest in being a professional puppeteer?
When I got interested in the Sesame Street, I was more interested in it from a music standpoint. I wanted to write kids songs. And so I ended up getting an internship at Sesame Street out of college a year after I graduated. And when I first started, probably my first day on set, they took me down to the floor to watch them shooting, and it was a Muppet insert day. And on the Muppet insert days, it was just the puppets, so the sets were all up off the ground, and the puppeteers were all standing. And I thought, wow, this is super cool. And I had never thought of
First time you had seen how it works?
Yeah, I had never... Yeah, I think in my head, I imagined, in the shots with them with humans, I imagined there were trenches in the floor. I don't know. Yeah. I had no idea. But seeing it all with the sets raised and everything, I thought, oh, that's super cool. And so that was really my first time that the idea of being a puppeteer kind of occurred to me.
Right. Also going back, are your parents creative? Do you think their creative identity was passed on to you at all genetically? Any kind of creativity? Well,
my mom was a piano teacher. And she, played classical music and taught, and I studied with her since I was 3.
Oh, she taught you piano?
Yeah, off and on. When I was 3, the way it is when you're, at least for me, when your mom's a piano teacher, you don't take it as seriously, you don't feel as pressure, so like I would sometimes practice, sometimes not. But certainly my introduction to the world of music was through her. And so she was, an incredibly creative person. And also just, creative and imaginative as a human being. Like she loves still fairies and magic. And I remember she made this little vine on my wall. Like every time I would read a book, she would like fill in the name of the book.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, to inspire me to like, fill up the most of mine. I got mad and tore it down one day. It doesn't matter. But the point is, yes, she was super creative. So I definitely get a lot of that from her.
What about your dad?
My dad, interestingly, he draws and has a creative side too, but I feel like from him I got more my sort of work ethic. He was like a hard worker, nose to the grind. So he did drywall, for most of his life, and practical stuff. And so I feel like I got a really nice balance from the both of them. Right. But yeah, probably the creativity more so from my mom.
And both of those things are important in what you do for a living, right? The right brain and left brain.
The hard work side probably more than the creativity. Right. In terms of earning a living in the entertainment industry, it's like relentless determination. I tell people is 100% the way you're successful. Like you have to have talent. You have to be ready to perform when you get your opportunity. But to get those opportunities, it's so much nose to the ground.
Got to be relentless. At least for what I'm learning from you.
100%. Yeah.
You have 3 incredible daughters who you've done.
I mean, it's subjective, Malcolm.
Depending how it's going today.
I like them.
You and your wife, Janet, have done a great job. Does creativity ever help you with your parent skills in any way? Looking back, at least. Well,
it's funny, when you were giving the definition of creativity in the beginning, the first thing I thought was, as a parent, you're constantly just juggling, like, to get through a day takes creativity. Like, okay, so-and-so is getting out of art class at this time, and I have to pick up this one to take her to work, and trying to figure out, it actually, I think that's you have to be creative to come up with solutions of how to get through, navigate life as a parent, and how to reach them,
So not only doing, like, the minivan thing like I did with my kids, like you're taking all their appointments, but...
Yeah, but also, just how to reach them and how to talk to them about things, when they want to learn stuff, they have questions, they ask you, how do you run the washing machine, for example?
Right.
And I haven't thought about it. I've been using our washing machine for however many years. So when you think about how do I communicate that to them, differing, depending on what their age is, your explanation of what a washing machine does might be different, So I feel like parenting really kind of forces you to be creative, hopefully, to make topics that are maybe not interesting to your kids, and understandable to your kids.
I think you're bringing up a great thing I learned from being a teacher. It's one thing to know something, but to teach it is another. I remember the person who let me teach first, my friend Sarah Mayonnaise, she was sick one day and she asked if I would teach the class, and I was like, this is hard. Because I had to teach something I knew in and out, but to get it to 22 diverse kids, that's a whole nother.
Well, I know Sarah Mayonnaise, and from one of my daughters was in her very first class as a teacher. She'd been an assistant before, but her first time taking over class, and I remember talking to her because one of the students was a little more challenging, and I was like, I wasn't like complaining, but I was just like, how is my daughter supposed to kind of navigate this? Like I want her to like learn to read and write and, math. And she was like, well, learning to be around other kids and interact with them is what they're learning in kindergarten. Yeah. And I was like, oh, right. Like I never had considered that before. So I feel like even her approach to that and just that concept is a creative sort of a concept.
I think you have to be a teacher. And I think that's also why during the pandemic, when things went kind of back to normal, so many kids couldn't get along on the playground because they hadn't had the 2 years of learning to get along with diverse kids.
By the way, Sarah also, I volunteered to come in and help, and she told me to do Pumpkin Day, where you cut up pumpkins and then the kids have... And there was, they don't have a lot of time, the teachers, to explain things. So she's like, okay, you're going to take these 6 kids. Here's a chart. She gave me a giant knife. She's like, just cut open the pumpkin and they can feel it with their hands. And I was like, what? Like I have no idea what I'm doing. So trying to ask them, well, what do you think this feels like? Where does this make you think? And so I feel like I had to be creative. I mean, creativity is everything, right?
Yeah.
Like in all aspects of life, but I felt like that I had to be creative and to figure out how to balance, holding a giant pumpkin knife and have a bunch of kindergartners I didn't know. So that was fun.
Let's see. Who's the most creative puppeteer that you remember being inspired by as a kid, and why? So pick a puppeteer you like, but who's the one that you're like, oh my gosh, how's he doing physical, vocal, everything?
Frank Oz to me is, the master. I mean, of course, everybody loves Jim Henson and his, creativity and show creating and character creating and just world building is, what everybody aspires to.
That's a great thing. But for people that don't know, what do you mean the world building aspect?
Like creating like the world of Fraggle Rock, the world of even Sesame Street, just like what is that environment? What are the characters that live there? Dark Crystal was, came more from Brian Froud, right. But certainly they created a script. He and Frank, I think Frank also created a script to go with that world. So world building is like figuring out the characters in that world and how the world works and the rules of the magic in that world and those sorts of things. But specifically as a performer, I feel like Frank Oz was the one that always inspired me the most. And his characters are just legendary, Cookie Monster, Grover, Miss Piggy, Animal, Fozzie Bear, like just, epic. Yoda.
Wide range, right?
Wide range, and not just voices, but just wide range of personalities. And his manipulation also. I think he was, when you look at that early Sesame Street stuff, it's not great. I mean, it's amazing characters, but if you look at their puppetry, you're seeing them figure it out on camera.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's better if they would have the rods pinned, and then they've, figured out ways to not have an arm pinned all the time. You could have an assistant, or you could do both. So you see them improving in puppetry, and so we all get the benefit of that coming up like, oh, that's how it's supposed to look. But some of the stuff Frank does in Star Wars movies with Yoda is incredible. Miss Piggy in Muppet Caper.
Yes.
There's some amazing puppetry there. There's stuff in Lady Holiday's office that's just incredible and hilarious. And so he's
many levels of things going on.
Just incredible body movement and positions and arm rods. And by the way, I've had Miss Piggy on. I've had the opportunity to perform her. That is not an easy puppet.
Or
it's
the voice,
heavy,
right?
unwieldy. Yeah, I mean, so just incredible.
Let's talk about directing. I've heard a lot of podcasts and interviews with you, but you haven't talked too much about directing. I think the first time I knew that you did that is you invited me to the set of Crank Yankers.
Yeah, that was.
Can I just preface this to say that you're like, hey, just hang out because I'm really busy, and then I found out you were directing 2 episodes at the same time, going back and forth, right?
No, but. That is sort of what happened. I think that particular day, we did have 2 sets going at the same time, but I've never directed, and I don't know if you could direct 2 sets at the same time. I was the lead puppeteer on Crank Yankers.
Okay.
So I was kind of supervising the puppetry on both sets, but each set had its own director. I was not directing that specific day that you're talking about, but I was going back and forth, just making sure all the puppeteers had what they needed to help work out blocking and any sort of...
Just double checking everything.
Well, and just, my job as the lead puppeteer on that show was to... If there were any gags that were happening, any rigging and things, I was, had to make sure it was working and how it would work and offer suggestions. You're kind of a liaison between the puppeteers and the director. Right. So I was doing that on 2 sets at once. But as far as directing goes, Crank Yankers was my first DGA show that I directed on.
Was that the first time, the first round before you guys were off for 13 years?
No, that was season 5. So that was when we had come back.
Okay.
And so
how did you get the opportunity?
So John Kimmel was our showrunner for seasons 5 and 6. And when we started early on in the season, as a puppeteer on the show, you have a lot of responsibility. You have to learn these tracks. You have to come up with movements for it. And then the director kind of hones that with you. And then as the lead puppeteer, you even have a bigger responsibility of not only overseeing your own puppetry, but everybody else's and making sure everything looks good. So you're kind of edging into the world of directing. You're kind of looking at more of the whole set and what the cameras are doing and what the sets
is it
look
also
like.
after years of experience, because you've been on the set and you've probably seen every aspect of everything?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a natural progression. A lot of actors eventually want to direct or, produce and stuff, because you're seeing, things come up that you're like, oh, it's too bad we didn't. In the production meeting, I could have told them, hey, this should be a live hand puppet because they have to pick something up. So you're kind of learning those things through experience. And so at the beginning of the season, I was doing a couple calls and I thought, boy, I bet I could direct this. Like I'm seeing, what's happening. I was like, I feel like I could do it. So I talked to John, and
he had been directing.
John's a great director. He really is. He's super creative when it comes to puppets and puppetry and thinking outside the box with how to shoot stuff. But I talked to him about it, and I'm so grateful that he gave me that opportunity, because a lot of producers are worried about letting the performers direct, because then you have like the responsibility of being in the scene but also directing the scene. It's like it's harder than just directing for some people or to some degree, but I actually love it. I love directing scenes I'm in, because when I am in the scene, I always have those ideas like, ooh, I wish we could start over here and then walk in, or I wish I could get another take of that. Right. And so as a puppeteer or the lead puppeteer, you can ask for those things, and I often make those suggestions.
So you have a lot of freedom.
And especially
it's a lot of pressure, but also a lot of freedom.
Right. As a director, I don't have to ask permission to do another take. I can say, let's do it. Let's go again. Right. And so I love the control of that, and because I'm a perfectionist, I think, by nature. Yeah. do you get that vibe? So it gives me the freedom to work on that stuff. But also, as a director, you're really more an arbiter of taste than anything else. I think the best directors are letting everybody bring their A game. Yeah. And you're saying, oh, I really liked when you did that thing. Maybe let's do it this way instead of that other way that we were trying before. And so you're letting the people bring you their great ideas, and then you're just selecting the ones that go with your other ideas to make the sort of overall picture.
That makes me think of two things. You're building confidence at the same time in your performers, and I've seen how kind you are to people you're working with, but also back to parenting or teaching, and it's difficult when you get a kid that's saying no to everything. My wife and I learned early on that you pick two things that you would like them to do, and then you let them choose one, and in the end, they're winning because they think they're in control, and you also got them to do something.
Oh, that's super smart. Yeah, I like that. What was the first part that you said?
Building confidence in your team.
Oh, right.
I remember also being in the green room with you guys for Crank Anchors, and you had a lot of games up there, like Rubik's Cubes and things. Was that for like a mental break to help them not lose their mind?
No, that was because we had done a set. We had done one of the sets took place at one of the calls took place at a GameStop type of a place. So there was a set that had all these puzzles and games. So I asked the prop department. I was like, hey, can we keep some of those for the green room just for for fun? So yeah, just to kill time up there. But I do think both as a performer and as a director, keeping it light on set, keeping it positive is a super important part of creating that vibe on set. You get the best work from people when they're feeling good about themselves and confident. And it's hard because as a director, in particular as a director of puppetry, for me, I'm being critical of their work. I'm saying, hey, make sure you look down at the thing before you pick it up, and telling people what to do. And so if you're just giving notes and saying that was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong, it busts people apart. So I don't like try to falsely build people up and give them pretend feedback, because people can tell when you're just saying like, hey, great job, but here's what I really need you to do. they get that, right? So I think you have to be genuinely allow yourself to be genuinely inspired by what you're seeing, and
you've been sincere from what I've seen, and that goes a long way. Well,
and I've had the great fortune of working with puppeteers that are at a super high level, so I genuinely am impressed. I just shot this by the time this I don't know how soon this podcast comes out, I'm sure it'll be out by then, but we just shot this new video for Weird Al, and I did it with 3 puppeteers I've worked with a lot: Paul McGinnis, Alice Deneen, and Amanda Maddock, and they're just some of the best tabletop puppeteers I've ever worked with. And so, I wasn't even directing that, but I was just floored by watching those guys work. So I am genuinely impressed with other performers, and I think letting them know that is important.
Right.
As a director, as a castmate, keeping those relationships positive.
Well, I've just thought of an unexpected question. So if you go into work with someone, I know you did a video with Eminem and also Weezer, so Weird Al. Have you noticed it's a little bit challenging when you go to make a puppet video or a movie with people that haven't before? Is there a little bit of time that it takes to be like, okay, here's where you need to stand,
Right. Well, I've done a lot of like celebrity interview, man on the street type stuff.
Right.
And I think, because they're such seasoned performers, they generally pick up on the technical stuff. Like, okay, the puppet's here. Don't look down at the puppeteer. Don't look at the monitor. Like stuff they sort of get. But you have to let them know. I tell them early on, like, by the way, I'm not like a gotcha puppeteer. Like, I'm not like Triumph, the who's hilarious. Yeah. But I'm not trying to make people look bad. Like, I'm not, because that's usually their biggest fear, is that when you're working with a puppet, or that they're gonna say something like to insult you,
demeaning. Yeah.
So I try to let them know early on that that's not the vibe, and if I can make them laugh or put them at ease with something unexpected, then a lot of times you can just relax into it. But I mean, everybody's different, like some people are really reserved.
I love on your demo reel, the one with Susan Sarandon, when you play the French guy. And that's a good example of what you're talking about, because it seems very mean through the whole thing, but it ends with this wonderful, both of you laughing. wait,
it seems mean?
No, it's
what part?
I'm sure it's all set up that way, but I don't know where the circumstance was or the location, but you're interviewing her. You're this French interviewer that seems condescending and stuff, and she seems annoyed, but then you end it with this big laugh, which was great.
Go back and watch it. I think you will find that I am not mean to her in any way. But
no, I didn't mean it that way. It looked like an uncomfortable interview, but
it was.
You let it. I don't know if it was planned.
Real. No, that's 100% real. She was so uncomfortable. I have nothing against Susan Sarandon.
Right.
If she'll never listen to this.
Yeah.
But she was not vibing with the idea, and we found that one moment where she laughed and had fun, and that's what made it into the.
No, but that's what I'm saying that you're good at, because I didn't know if it was staged or not, but now we know that it was real. But you ended up bringing a bright spot from her, which is great, and you made it clear that you're not there to make her feel bad.
Well, I think that's what it was, and I think part of that is me saying, and I don't remember in that particular interview if I had time to say that at the top or not, but I think her being uncomfortable was her trepidation of, I'm an Academy Award-winning actress. I'm here with this, stupid guy doing a bad French accent. Like, what's going to happen? Is he going to, try and... So I think she, realized at that point that, like, oh, I'm okay to just be myself. Because that's ideally those interviews. You want them to be themselves. You don't want them to be like a put-on version of themselves reacting to.
Right.
But there was another actress.
Well, and I think it's tough for an actor and actress to stay because a lot of times you have these comedians that catch them off guard, especially if it's like a political thing, and then they use it and they spin it in a way that nobody expected. But you don't do that. I've seen you do quite a few of these, and you always make them smile.
It's just not that. It's just not what appeals to me.
Yeah.
Like there are people that are super clever and great at like those put downy sort of things. I just don't. It's not really where my brain goes. Yeah, it's not where my brain goes.
Who are some directors who inspire you? Would that possibly include Frank Oz, who started puppeteering with Jim Henson, but later expanded into acting and directing? So it could be a director for puppet stuff, but it could be anybody, Scorsese or Terry Gilliam, like whoever. I mean,
so I certainly admire Frank Oz and have seen. Many of his movies, In and Out and The Heist and Little Shop. But honestly, it's a tough question for me because I didn't grow up wanting to be a director.
Right. And
so, certainly the biggies like Steven Spielberg and, I loved Hook as a kid and all of Steven Spielberg's and certainly like things like Schindler's List are, incredible. But I come at directing more as, someone who has a very specific expertise in puppetry. There's some directors, the majority of directors nowadays are people that are fascinated with lighting and camera lenses, and they're very much into the visual of directing. And then sort of the more old school directors are like theater directors that love to talk to actors about their performance and their emotion and that sort of thing. I tend to be more in that camp,
right?
Because having a performing background, but also there's this sort of third level of someone who is knowledgeable about specifically framing puppets,
right?
And that's really what my thing is. So I love. There's certainly I can give you a list of movies that I loved. But I never looked to see who was directing. I didn't. Well, follow directors.
What about now that you have directed? Is there a movie you've seen in the last few years that are like, oh my gosh, I know what's going on behind the scenes, and that really impresses me, the complexity of the.
Honestly, my favorite movie probably in the last, I don't even know when this came out, but I loved Saving Mr. Banks. I'm a big Disney fan.
Yeah.
But just how that movie went back and forth, weaving between the story of Mary Poppins, Mary Poppins, and then back to her life as a kid. And I don't even know if it was the directing that made that. I mean, certainly I'm sure the directing was good. Whoever directed it was great. But I don't even know if it was the directing or the script or their acting, but I just loved the emotion of that movie. That's more what I'm drawn to than anything else. I love the Pixar stuff, Ron and John Clemens, those guys are amazing.
Sounds like bringing the emotions in to be sincere is important to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, a few years ago, you and I collaborated in My Live Kids.
Nightmare. Why would we talk about this, Malcolm? Nightmare of nightmares.
That's right. But either way, we did this show together, Mr. Malcolm's Music Factory. It was written by my friend Matt Ritchie.
Oh, Matt Ritchie. Ugh. Just hearing the name.
Yeah, well, I got to go there. Right. This is the dark part of the interview.
Yeah.
When we were working on it, each time I've appreciated your polite but confident insight that always improves the project in myriad ways. So I remember when we were working on the script and the blocking and everything, I appreciated how you're like, this is really good, but it might work better this way. You would help me with the wording, the blocking, the performance, talking loud enough. So that was my perspective. But I need to ask you, is it hard to turn that off when you're led by a strict director who insists on sticking to the original script no matter what? Is there ever a point, you don't have to name any names, but that you really knew that it could have been done better, but you have to keep quiet?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, here's the thing. It's all relative, whether it could have been done better or not, right?
Right.
That's just a matter of opinion. Whether I would have done it differently myself, yeah, for sure.
Right.
And I come to it, every year you get more and more experience and you bring more and more to what you're doing. And so I always offer suggestions. I always, especially on puppet shoots, if I think something could be done better, or how about if we pull the rod and pin the prop to the hand because it'll look better. And I've always got those thoughts and ideas, and I share them. On the first day, you don't want to just come at them with a ton of ideas, but depending on how long your shoot is, and you see quickly, does the director oh great, yeah, that'll look much better, let's do that, or are they no, we like it this way,
Yeah.
And what's tough is when you see someone who's never shot puppets before, but they're like, no, we know how to do this, and you're like,
yeah.
Okay, but you really don't,
And at the end of the day, you probably, if you make that suggestion, you could save them money because they might have to redo it.
You save time, you could save money, and mostly it's to make it look better. But it's always been clear to me that the director's the director.
Yeah. And
the producers are the producers, and those are the people. It's their project. It's not my project. It's commercial art, and I'm a guy for hire. So, as strongly as I might disagree with something, unless it's something that personally offends me, that I don't want to do, then I quickly say, okay, yeah, no problem. Let's do it your way. And sometimes they detect in my voice that, yeah, let's do it your way, the dumb way. But I don't ever say that. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't ever say that.
That makes me think when we work on the show together, I remember there was one scene where Genevieve right away was like, I think this is going to be taken the wrong way, and we had to think of a way to reword it. So that must happen, it's not only does it offend you, but will it reach the viewers in the way that you intended?
Well, this is one of those interesting things in kids TV in particular, or kids theater as that piece was, you say something about like, oh, there's so many balls here. Now a kid is never going to think anything dirty, right? A kid's thinking balls. They're, basketballs and volleyballs and whatever. But adults on set are like, oh, so many balls. So you always have to like, say to yourself, like, is this something that we should even care that adults have a second thought about?
Right.
Because you're ultimately making it your show for kids. However, there are also the opposite happens where there are writers and people who think, oh, I'll throw in this little thing that's got 2 levels and the adults will know I'm actually talking about, sex when I say this thing. You're like, no.
Yeah.
You don't do that in a kid's show. Like, you don't need to make that clever joke that it's okay, it'll go over the kids' heads. No, you're still not going to do it.
I think if you use innuendo, shows like the one that we did together, when you have a mixed audience of little kids, teenagers, and adults, that could just throw off the focus because they're going to be stuck on that line.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And they're going to forget where we are in the story. So that loses the momentum of the show, right?
Sesame Street is always one of those places, especially early days, that was great at being good for kids and adults.
Yeah.
But it didn't do it through innuendo. It did it through having clever setups and references that the adults would get. But that didn't take away from the message and the the sweetness of what was happening or the fun of what was happening. So it's a difficult thing to write for a family audience to reach everybody. But that that's sort of
I think what they did a lot more subtle, at least when I grew up, was I'm thinking the chicken soup scene when there's like 3 witches.
Yeah.
They're stirring the pot and they're making chicken soup, but it's also based on the Shakespearean play. So only the parents are like,
Right. Only the parents get that reference. Only the parents know who the celebrity guests are on the show. But the pieces that are written and the performances are geared towards kids. So that's
the number one thing.
Yeah.
How did you get into doing voiceover work? Is it harder, easier, or just different? I guess I would think, you don't have to do the puppet, so it's easier. But how different is it?
Voiceover, by far the easiest job, best job in Hollywood. Like, I think Chris Rock has a thing about it. He talks about it. Like, you just, I don't remember what his bit was, but you go in the booth, you say your lines, and you're not on a sweaty sound stage.
Nobody
you're not holding up puppets. Nobody sees you. You can wear what you want. Yeah. It's the best. And it's usually, a couple hours. And then, it's so definitely one of the best shows because of that. Ton of competition for it.
Yeah.
Really hard to book voiceover work. So for me anyway. So the few guys that do it constantly are so good and can do so many voices that casting directors and directors just bring them in because they're like, oh yeah, this guy's great. Like, why we don't need to do a big search to find somebody. We'll just go to our 6 like great voiceover guys we know or great voiceover women we know and have one of them do it. And if you look at their credits, like if you look at who's the guy that does Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and all those. I know
who you're talking about. I can't remember his name.
Stupid. What is his name? Anyway, you go to these big voiceover guys.
Like a Hank Azaria or something like that.
Yeah, but you go to these big voiceover guys' IMDb page, and they've got 600 credits. Just because they can do 5-6 projects in a day.
And Mel Blanc did almost all the voices.
Yeah, incredible. So it's a great job, super fun. I think I don't know what my first voiceover gig was, but you know what it was? I think I did Celebrity Deathmatch. They had that.
I do remember that
stop motion show back in the day, and I did a couple. I did Anthony Edwards, and I did Kenny G. They were all like bad impressions of people, but yeah, I think that was my first VO job, and I was like, man, this is so easy. I wish I could do this all the time.
I wanted to know also, are most of them that you read a script and then they animate it to go with it later, or do sometimes you have to pop into something that's already been done? I guess that's like Crank Anchors, right?
I've done all sort of variations of that. I mean, a lot of times you're given a sketch of the character, so you see what it's going to be, and then they just animate to you later. I did a show, there's a show called Mad TV, where they already had it pretty much animated, and you were just coming in and doing voices to the already done picture.
Yeah.
But I think that was more the exception. Normally they're animating after you've done it.
Right. I assume that would be much easier.
Yeah. Or a lot of times you're doing ADR to something that you puppeteered, which is
Right.
also a whole separate voiceover skill.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the latest film or TV show that included puppetry that you were not in that impressed you?
First of all, I'm not impressed by anything I'm not in, Malcolm. So I want to be clear about that.
Skip.
Yeah. Next question. No, let's see. Latest, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Andor.
Yeah,
there was
absolutely.
a little robot character on there that my buddy Dave Chapman did, and he voiced it, and he also puppeteered. I thought that was really cool. Those little it's not easy to do robots cleverly. I'm sure there was a whole team of people, not just him. That was really cool. I really loved. It's not a new show, but Don Quixote.
Mm-hmm.
On PBS is great.
That's from the Mr. Rogers Company, right?
Yeah, and that's friends of mine. Haley Jenkins and Frankie Cordero, and just a really great cast of performers. And I just watched Eric on Netflix.
Me too. We just finished it.
Yeah, my buddy Ollie Taylor did the walk. I mean, it's such a small world. Puppeteers, we all know each other. But Ollie Taylor did the main walk-around character, and I know other people were doing the animatronics on that as well. But that was cool.
That was good.
Dark, but cool. And Raymond Carr also was the lead, I think, puppeteer on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Does creativity, that part of your brain, help you collaborate with other puppeteers, especially when you're the lead?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think by its definition, creativity includes collaboration, at least for me. I mean, I think if you're an artist, somebody who is painting by yourself in a studio, maybe not as much. But on set, any kind of creativity has to include being open to all the ideas around you that are coming in from everybody, and what someone else says is going to inspire your next line. If it's any sort of an improv situation, right. I mean, it's completely collaborative.
You got to help everybody get along too, right? I'm sure sometimes there's some disagreements.
For sure, and there's no leads in a once the scene starts, there's no like status really of performers, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And so I feel like all that kind of goes out the window once the scene starts, and so you have to really pay attention to all the little details that are coming into you to help inform your own creativity.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, total sense. What led you to be a consultant? Was it years of experience that helped you develop this talent? Yeah,
I mean, I think it was just people calling and asking for help with projects. Can you people who hadn't done puppets, usually someone who hasn't done a puppet show before, wants to know, what are the tools you
right.
use to do it.
Especially younger or
yeah, well, honestly,
less experienced.
Even in the entertainment industry, there are people that have done TV and movies for years that haven't worked on a puppet show because it's such a small percentage of
right.
the industry. But, telling them how we do stuff with humans, where we've got little carts that you can wheel yourself around on, and all the little tricks and equipment we've come up with that we use monitors to perform, all those things, just kind of educating people. And it's usually something, if you get hired first on a project or you're the lead on a project, I usually give them all that knowledge as we're gearing up to shoot. So there are situations where they just ask you ahead of time just to consult on something, you know. But usually, I think most of the time it comes through something I'm performing in and just sort of evolves into that.
Right. And this probably is also not included on your website, correct?
Consulting?
Yeah.
I think it is. Malcolm, have you looked at my website? I feel like you're making this up as we go.
You and I are both drummers, percussionists. Are you more comfortable reading notation, memorizing, or improvising, first of all?
Well, this goes back to what you were saying at the top about, being a drum set player is all about, I think improvising and to some degree. Classical music, there is no improvising. Mm-hmm. You're playing what's on the page. It's pretty sacred. I mean, So
was that a big change, going from reading notation, everything is specific, counting measures, to going to these improv with the puppets where you just complete freedom?
Well, maybe. I mean, I think, the improv part of it comes in the performing, the dynamics, how much time you take, when you're playing a piece in certain parts. There is an improv element to that. You know what I mean? Ideally, you're a lot. There's a
I think
life,
especially the conductor.
Yeah, and there's a life that's happening, and in an orchestra situation, you're responding to everything around you and the sonority of the orchestra.
Interpreting.
But even as a solo performer doing a marimba solo, hopefully it's not exactly the same every time you do it. So there is a life and an improv to it. But yeah, I have that right brain, anal retentive side for sure to me. And so like the detail of like playing something specifically and hitting those notes is part of it.
Right.
And then the creativity and the improv side of it comes in, how that comes out of you. You use all those specific attention to detail things in the practicing of the piece, and then in the performance you kind of let go of all that. You've done all that work, and now you're letting the creativity part really happen. So I think that does sort of dovetail nicely into puppetry, and I feel like it for me, it all sort of connected as just another performance medium.
Right. On the same topic, do your rhythmic skills as a percussionist ever help you puppeteering performances? In addition to that, does it help you with ADR? Like the fact that you're pretty good at, mimicking a rhythm or learning it? I
would say 100% ADR, for sure it helps. And I've had people be very complimentary to me in ADR sessions. They're like, oh, you're so on the dialogue, and it is because it's a completely musical thing for me.
Right.
When they do, a lot of times they'll do playback and they'll show you what you did the first time around, or if you're dubbing something else, they'll show you what's there, and they'll say, do you want me to take that out when you do it? And I think a lot of performers prefer to just watch the visual, and for me, I'm like, no, like that's my guide, like the rhythm of how you say those words and which words are accented and how long certain ones. I want to hear that while I'm doing mine.
Right.
I might not use the same exact inflection, and that's another trick to allow yourself to do a different inflection but hear the rhythm of what's happening, so that it matches up but doesn't have to sound exactly the same. Because a lot of times the reason you're ADRing it is because they want a different read or different words within that read. So you have to be able to change it up but still adhere to the map of the rhythm. So for me, that's super connected to ADR.
Yeah. If you get the chance, would you ever like to direct a non-puppet film?
Maybe. I don't know. Good question. I mean, again, I think I'd feel like a fraud because I feel like my expertise is really in the puppetry part. I think I could do a kids or family project.
Right.
And I feel comfortable with that. I've definitely directed kids, without a puppet in the scene. It was like a larger puppet project, but then we were just shooting the kids for this, one section. I feel totally comfortable doing that. But like if, they did Godfather 4, I feel like I might be in trouble. Yeah.
On the same topic, I've noticed that nobody in any of your podcasts brought this up. What was it like to write, direct, and perform in your own 2017 film, New Roommate? This is one of my favorite things you did. What did you learn from that experience, and was it overwhelming doing everything? Well,
thank you for saying that. It's possible that nobody brought it up because nobody has ever seen it. I feel like it is one of those many projects that has gone on YouTube.
You did? Wasn't there a premiere? I remember I couldn't go to it, but there was one. Right?
There was. I did a comedy festival here at Hollywood, some Hollywood comedy festival. It was definitely played here. But anyway, yeah, that was amazing. An incredible experience. And I went to my friends, Alana McKissick and Nathan Moore, to be in it, and they were the husband and wife in it, but also helped me produce it. Like Nathan helped me produce everything. And I'd been doing little YouTube shorts. So these are all, there's no budget for any of this stuff, And so those guys were super experienced and knew, and it was what was really was most incredible about that experience was just how everybody sort of pitched in to help.
Yeah.
Like I needed a DP, and Nathan was like, I know a guy, and we shot at their house, and it was super small crew, and my buddy Dante Bosco came to do a little cameo in it, and then even on the post thing, I was working on a show at the time called Mutt and Stuff, and their post department just stepped in to help me layer in all the effects and music cues and color correction, like they just made it really pro for me.
Yeah, it looked really good.
So I was super lucky to just have good friends, like, you know, volunteer and help out with the time. So, you know, it was incredible. I mean, the directing part of it, again, it's sort of naturally what is going on in your mind anyway,
right,
as a lead puppeteer on stuff. So really, it was just,
and it's your story, so
yeah. And I had written it, so I knew what I had in mind.
By the way, is it out there anywhere? Is it on YouTube?
It's on my YouTube channel, Puppets and Shit, which you know, is there. It's also on my website if you'd ever bothered to look at it, Malcolm.
Do you think that creativity could be implemented in curing people or helping people with mental health struggles like depression or anxiety? Any specific insight? That part of your mind, that coming up with something on the spur of the moment in a challenging situation?
I mean, it makes sense to me that it would. You know, there's certainly, for me, creativity, being creative puts me in a state of happiness, positivity, even euphoria. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, one of my daughters volunteers at the Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, and she was talking to me about art therapy that they do there.
Right.
And so it certainly makes sense to me that it would be connected. And, you know, mental health is such a wide range of things. So I don't know if it could be used to help anybody, to help everybody. It makes sense that it could. Actually,
I'm thinking now, not only do we have art therapy and music therapy, but again, our friend Genevieve, I believe, does volunteer creative things at the hospital already.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of that is distraction from, you know, the sort of traumatic health things that these kids are going through, and just sort of making their experience at the hospital fun and better, and get their mind off problems. But even for adults, I mean, just finding ways. And I think you find like a lot of the most talented artists and musicians and you know, performers will have these, will tell you that they are their best selves when they're being creative, when they're performing, when they're doing whatever their creative medium is, and then struggle with mental health along with it, you know, at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, I think that connection makes a lot of sense.
I think it gives everybody escapism, whether you're watching it or, I'm sure you felt like this. I felt like it with music. They wake up in a bad mood and go do whatever it is you do creative, and suddenly you feel better because it's a big rush.
Yeah, and I've certainly, you know, I've done a little bit of convention appearances where you meet people that come up to you and tell you how much your work has meant to them, and that, you know, they're having a hard time in their lives, and certainly, and to me, anytime somebody says something like that, like, I'm just floored. Like, I wasn't making, you know, these performing these characters or making these pieces thinking that, we'll help somebody through a hard time in their lives, you know, but hearing that does happen, even if it's just happened once, like,
makes it worth it.
Oh my God, incredible. Yeah.
Some of my favorite shows, films you have been in include, I'm just going to name 4 of them.
This should be a long list, Malcolm. I'd like to hear as many as you can recall. Go on.
Oh, they're all on your website. It's okay. Greg the Bunny.
Yes.
Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance.
Check.
Adventures of Mr. Clown.
Okay.
And Bear in the Big Blue House.
Yes.
Which of those allowed you to improvise or have your own personal input the most?
Well,
where did you feel the most freedom?
What was the first one you said?
Greg the Bunny.
What was the second one you said?
The Dark Crystal.
Okay, so Dark Crystal...
Or we can go through each one.
Yeah, Dark Crystal probably did not improvise much at all. I had a couple suggestions, certain things, but that was a pretty heavily scripted show. And then same with Bear in the Big Blue House. In fact, I was just coming up when I was on Bear. Right. I wasn't even I had a couple lines here and there, so probably no improvising there. Mr. Clown is probably the one that I improvised the most on. And that's just the nature of, you know, the creator, Tom Caltabiano, and he and I have done lots of little collaborations over the years with different characters there. But yeah, that one probably, a lot of those pieces, Tom will just have an idea like, hey, this is the name we're talking about, and we're going to spell out the name, and then we're going to say something funny, and we say, okay, so we just make it all up. But even Greg the Bunny, there was also a fair amount of improv, I recall. And in fact, so I did a character called Tardy the Turtle.
One of my favorites.
I love doing Tardy, and I, people liked it, and he would only have 1 or 2 lines a show. And so I would get these big laughs in the read-throughs because, I would just have this one, killer line that the writers would give us. And so we did an episode where he said something in the script that I was like, I don't know if that's the best line. And then I told my friend Dan Milano, who's the creator of the show, I was like, I don't know if this is the best line. I thought maybe he would just say something like, I'm a turtle. And Dan was like, oh yeah, that's great. Do that, right? So we get to the read through. Now this is the story of me being young and stupid.
Yeah.
So we get to the read through, and I was like, I've got my better line ready to go, and so what I didn't realize. So we get to the line, and instead of saying whatever it was, I said, I'm a turtle, and it was dead. Cricket, dead silence. And Steve Levitan, the showrunner, looks down the table at me with this look what are you doing? What are you thinking? Could not have been more disgusted with me. And I felt like, you remember on the Flintstones, they used to shrink down when they were super embarrassed and they get really small. Yeah. I could feel myself shrink. It was the worst moment on that show. And I realized afterwards, it makes so much sense. Everybody's following along the script. Yeah. They're all reading. Even if you've got the best line ever, it's just, wait, that's not what was written here. It makes your mind pause for a second. Also, it's the writer's chance. The read-through is their chance to hear their work, and for the executives there to approve, not approve. They're counting laughs to see what works and what doesn't. So that was the wrong time to improvise. Yeah. So you definitely learn when you should and shouldn't. If you're going to do it in a read-through, maybe you add a little line after the real line, right? But you never change the line unexpectedly.
Yeah, so, and the other actors, your line might be their cue, right?
Exactly. So, that was a lesson learned for young Victor Yerrid.
I got to ask you, who came up with the purple crayon, though?
Definitely, it was not me. Crayons taste like purple. That was not my line. I didn't write. I don't think I wrote any of those things.
Can you do that one?
Crayons taste like purple. That character was so much fun, but if there was any improv in it, it was just in the little mannerisms, the little squeaks, and that
He's very physical.
But that stuff develops with any character, just little things that they say repeatedly, and then the writers catch on to it and they start including that in the script. So there was probably some improv in Greg the Bunny, just not at the read-throughs. That's not when you do it.
Right. Good note to everybody out there. Men in Black 2. Did you do the little coffee worms?
In a word, no. I did not. I did work on Men in Black 2.
What did you do in there?
I did. So at the auditions, they had us in teams doing versions of the worms. I don't even know if they were the real. They were called them the worm guys, by the way. That's what they called them.
I thought they were cockroaches till I looked it up, and I guess they are worms.
The worm guys. But I in the audition, I think I did them. But for the actual shoot, there was a big airport scene. Mm-hmm. Or not airport, sorry. They're Men in Black headquarters where there's all the different, it's like a travel, all the different aliens coming through. Right. And they had tons of characters in the background, these Rick Baker creations. And so I was doing radio control on some random alien's face. Nothing of any importance that anybody would ever know.
Well, at least we learned something.
We did.
What is the
I think what we learned, Malcolm, is that your research has been garbage. No, I'm just kidding.
What is the difference between a puppet wrangler and a puppet captain?
Good question. So a puppet wrangler is the person on set who is responsible for the props and puppets and costumes and how they look on camera. So there are people that build the puppets and people that make the costumes, but once it comes to set, if there's any malfunction, like a button pops off a shirt, the puppet wrangler might fix that, or if something needs to be rigged to the puppet's hand, they need to hold up a prop, they'll rig that to the puppet's hand. So they're responsible for the on-set preparation and rigging of all the puppets. Puppet captain is just another word for lead puppeteer that the Muppets and Sesame Street Jim Henson Company uses. Puppet captain. It basically just means the lead puppeteer, the person who's head of all the puppeteers, in charge, and like I said, the liaison between the performers and the director. So that's more of a I don't even know if it's an administrative position. I mean, there's a lot of more planning of shots and things, and how the camera is going to capture the puppets that you're.
I mean, it makes
involved in.
sense if there's a director, you're going to make their life easier because they bring you in as the puppet leader, and you can make sure that's all taken care of for when they're ready to shoot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to know, you and your wonderful wife, Janet, have raised 3 great kids, 3 daughters. Do you think any of your creativity was sent from you to them? Are you seeing any bits of what you do for a living or the creative right or left side of your brain come through them?
Well, I would love to take credit for their talent, but they're definitely creative girls. One of my daughters is an artist, and she paints and draws, and
she's great.
Certainly does not get any of that from me because I have zero visual talent. That would be from my wife. But all 3 of them sing and can perform. And I don't know if they so much got that from me or have learned it by me forcing them to be in little projects and things that I was
fight or flight.
Yeah, exactly. That I've done over the years. But certainly, I think what they have gotten is the idea that performing is fun or interesting. They've been on set since they were little, hanging out with me. And so they've been able to be exposed to that world and be a part of that world. So if anything, I would say they got some of that from me. But my greatest hope is that they do not go into the entertainment industry in any way. It's so hard being freelance. I just want them to have 9-to-5 jobs, pensions, and
not worry about the stuff that you'd have to worry about.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, I got to say though, because I was lucky enough to be a teacher to all 3 of them, I saw all kinds of stuff. I think they were, all 3 of them, very artistic in their different ways. And because I'm a music teacher, I was always blown away by, I'd tell one of them, I need a drummer. And they'd be like, I don't play drums. I'd be like, sit down, and they would nail it.
I do remember that my youngest daughter, there's some project they do every year where you kind of make a poster of your who you want to be, historical figure, and she did Jim Henson and made a little Kermit puppet, and I thought that was super sweet.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm going to read 2 different quotes, and I want to hear your response, and I want to know, how are these 2 quotes related to your own creativity? So here's the first one.
Okay.
This is by Frank Oz. I just want to work with talented people who are enjoyable to be with and take big, huge risks, from high comedy to deep, dark, brooding drama to thriller. I just want to go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? Like, that's dream. Your castmates, the people that you're working with, or if you're directing, the people you're directing. Their choices and their creativity are what inspire you to do your own work. And so, I mean, that I support that idea. It makes sense. And I think, especially when he says people that take big risks, I'm again, I mentioned being perfectionist. Like I'm reticent to take big risks because I'm always afraid, not that I'm reticent to take big risks. I'm reticent to vary my performance a lot because I'm afraid, they'll use this other take and not the one where I got the lines right. So I try to stay within the confines of what I think will be the good performance, right? But when you work with people that they change it up every time and they do some like crazy performance that that'll never make it in, I admire that so much. I love to be around those people because sometimes that's where brilliance comes through, and that off the cuff stuff, can sometimes make the scene so much better. So good quote.
Totally
I support
agree.
it.
And then Jim Henson said, as children, we all live in a world of imagination, fantasy, and for some of us, that world of make-believe continues into adulthood.
What does Jim Henson know? No. I mean, that sort of Peter Pan complex, that perennial child thing. I mean, that's...
You suffer from that. I
suffer from that. Most puppeteers are, big kids. I mean, dads are big kids, most of the time too. Yeah. But I think, people would often say to me, because I always am, watching Disney movies or going outside to play or swim or hike or whatever with my kids. And when the girls were little, people would often say, "Oh, you're such a good dad. Like, you spend so much time with your kids." And I'm a good dad. I'm okay. But really, we just had similar interests. Like, I love kids.
You're the 4th kid.
Yeah. And so I wanted to do those things with them. And I got joy, from singing Disney songs in the car and doing whatever. I'm definitely one of those people, as Jim Henson said, that has stayed in that world, and hopefully, continue to stay there.
Agreed. Are there any current projects you're working on that you'd like to promote?
Yeah. I'm in a World War II remake called The Germans Didn't Mean It. No, yes, I am. You'll have to clue that, Malcolm, if you don't want. Yes, I am currently touring with the Yerrid brothers.
Oh, still doing that. Cool.
Yeah, this incredible country band. And I, was not very familiar with this world before doing it. These live like stadium tours. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We walk on stage and there are just thousands of people that love these guys, and they're super nice and super talented performers. So that's a lot of fun. And
is that East Coast, right?
No, we did perform on the East Coast, but we're all over. We're like I think the next one's in like Des Moines. And
can you say the name one more time so people can
yes,
look that up?
It's Yerrid Brothers, Avett Brothers, and they're a country band that has they created 3 puppet characters that were built by the Jim Henson Company, and there's 9 puppeteers. And they're performing in their live stadium shows with them.
Any of those puppeteers you want to announce?
No. Okay. No, I don't care. Actually, the one I will announce is my good buddy, Paul McGinnis, who is the lead. He's the lead on that show, and he does such an incredible job, and he choreographs most of the stuff. And he's not only one of my favorite puppeteers and human beings in the world, but probably my favorite puppet choreographer. I consider myself to be pretty good at it, and he's like blows me out of the water. He's just great, and but there's a whole incredible team of 9 performers. They're all great, and lucky to work with all of them.
That's awesome.
That's a political thing to say. There are 2 that I really hate. I'm just not.
We won't mention them.
Yeah, I'm not going to say their names.
So everybody needs to go to victoryerrid.com. I should probably
You
go
should
too.
go there, Malcolm.
Right, yeah.
Yes, you should be the first one.
All right. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks,
Victor,
buddy.
This is great. See you soon.
You're the best.